On today's edition of From the Forest, I'll be sharing the horrifying tale of 7 hikers who encountered something unknown and deadly in the mountains of Siberia. A tale that only one of the 7 hikers lived to tell. So I hope you'll come along for the journey as we explore the Khamar Daban backpacking incident. Thank you for joining me, and welcome. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. I hope you all had a great week, and before we start today's episode, I'd like to say thank you to Kevin and Pixel for their support and generosity. And if you enjoy the show, please consider following, sharing, and reviewing the podcast. This always supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. And you can also support us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. And if you'd like to have your paranormal encounter shared on the podcast, you can submit your story through email at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com, through voice message at speakpipe.com/paranormalmysteries, or on our website at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com. And of course, all these links can be found in the show notes. Anyone interested in the unexplained is no doubt familiar with the Dyatlov Pass incident, which occurred in the Ural Mountains of Russia in 1959, when 9 brave backpackers perished under extremely bizarre circumstances on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, roughly translated to Dead Mountain. However, another strange and heartbreaking case that you may not be familiar with took place in the Khamar Daban mountain range in southern Siberia in 1993. Many people have found similarities between these two cases, and some have even referred to the Khamar Daban story as Dyatlov Pass 2.0. And in order to give you a complete summation of what occurred and the facts as we know them, I'll be referring to articles from the sites Medium.com and DyatlovPass.com. We'll begin with the main story as told by the sole survivor of the incident, and we'll finish with some possible theories that people have had in an attempt to explain the bizarre events that follow. The Khamar Daban, also known as the Khamar Daban mountain range, is located in southern Siberia's Buryatia region, perched below Lake Baikal. Its rugged scenery has made this location a popular tourist hiking spot, but in 1993, 6 of those tourists would not make it out of the mountains alive. There are few answers in this case, and the lone survivor has refused to talk about the traumatic event since her first statement to police in 1993. 41-year-old Ludmila Korovina was an experienced hiking instructor and survivalist, labeled as a master by her peers and students. She was known for her tough love on her students, often pushing them very hard. This tough love ultimately paid off, however, as her students described her as being a good teacher, and she taught them confidence and crucial hiking skills. In the summer of 1993, Ludmila had planned to hike with 6 of her students to the Khamar Daban mountain range. She was very experienced in this region, which was a popular tourist spot, and was considered a very safe place to hike, especially in the summer. Her students had trained with her for the trip, and she was very close to all of them. The first of the 6, and the closest to Ludmila, was 23-year-old Alexander Sasha Krisin. Ludmila had known Sasha for most of his life, and considered him to be almost a son to her. The other 5 students were 24-year-old Tatiana Filipenko, 19-year-old Denis Fachkin, 17-year-old Valentina Valya Yudichenko, 16-year-old Victoria Zalasova, and 15-year-old Timur Bapanov. On August 2, 1993, the group of 7 arrived at the mountain range in the town of Marino and were very excited for their journey into the mountains, and the weather forecast promised them clear and sunny skies. Ludmila and her students were one of the 3 hiking groups in the area, one of which was being led by Ludmila's daughter, Natalia. Their 2 groups had plans to meet on August 5th when their hiking routes would cross paths. All of the 6 students were ready to begin their hike, as this was their chance to prove themselves to be experienced hikers. This was a journey they had been planning for and anticipating for months, and as a result, the group had become close. The first 2 days of the hike had gone better than planned. The group had made extremely good time and was pushing themselves hard. By August 4th, however, as they were beginning their descent, the weather forecast proved to have been wrong, and they were hit with a rainstorm. And with the hikers' supplies soaked, their journey was slowed down by the added weight. Since the hikers were exhausted, Ludmilla decided to camp out in an exposed location, despite there being tree cover not far away. The group was unable to build a fire that night, but were still in good spirits. The next morning, an attempt at fire building was successful, and they ate breakfast together before heading out for the day. They planned to meet up with Natalia and expected to be able to do so given how quickly they had made their way up the mountain the previous day. Later that day, Natalia and her group made it to the meeting spot, but her mother never showed. The group moved on, and she was not worried about her mother, assuming that the bad weather had put her back. But unfortunately, what had set the group back was much worse than she could have ever imagined. On August 10th, a group of kayakers noticed something in the tree line as they were paddling down a river at the base of the Khamar Daban mountains. A lone girl was standing and looking at them. The kayakers got out of their boats, and when they approached her, she was reportedly in shock and covered in dried blood. The girl became hysterical while trying to tell the kayakers her story, and eventually she identified herself as Valentina Yudichenko and said that she had been hiking with 6 others. Horrified, the kayakers took Valya to the nearest police station where a report was filed. However, it wasn't until years later that she was slowly able to tell the story of what actually happened to the other 6. But it was perplexing and terrifying. According to Valya, the group had set off down the mountain after eating breakfast that morning, but after only a few minutes, the first disaster struck. Sasha, who was at the back of the group, began to scream. When everyone turned, they saw that he was bleeding from his eyes and ears and frothing at the mouth. He fell to the ground convulsing and then became still. Ludmilla ran to him and ordered the rest of the group to continue. She was extremely distraught, trying in vain to get Sasha to regain consciousness. But the remaining group did not get far before they heard Ludmilla cry out. As they turned and ran to her, they saw that she was having the exact same symptoms as Sasha. Her eyes and nose were pouring blood, and she was frothing at the mouth. She began convulsing and then collapsed on top of Sasha. Tatiana, who had gotten to Ludmilla first, was the next to collapse, grabbing at her throat as though she couldn't breathe. She then slowly crawled over to a nearby rock and bashed her head against it until she was limp. Victoria and Timur both ran, while Dennis hid behind a rock, and Valya stood unable to move, having just watched 3 of her closest friends seemingly die within only a few minutes. Both Victoria and Timur collapsed while running and died in a similar manner, throwing up blood and clawing at their own throats and tearing their clothes off. Realizing they were the only ones left, Valya and Dennis ran to each other and hurried away from the site of their friend's death. But it wasn't long before Dennis collapsed and began convulsing as well. Scared for her life, Valentina ran and left her friends behind. She only had a tent and the clothes on her back for supplies. Valya ran down the mountain until she was certain that she was far enough away from the tragedy she had just witnessed. Under adequate tree cover, she set up the tent for the night and fell asleep. When she woke up and realized she was still alive, Valya knew immediately that she would need supplies if she was going to survive alone in the wilderness. The problem was that she knew she would have to return to the site of her friend's death to retrieve them, and knowing that she had no other choice, Valya made the trek back up the mountain, retracing her steps. When she reached the site, she saw that none of them had moved from the spots where they had fallen. Knowing they were all deceased, Valya quickly took the supplies she needed from their bodies and left, following power lines down the mountain. For 4 days she followed the power lines, hoping someone would find her, until she found a river and began to follow it. By the end of her 4th day, she was found by the kayakers and was brought to safety. Despite the police report, no official search was conducted until the 24th of August, and since Valentina was not able to recount her version of events yet, it took 2 days for authorities to find the bodies using helicopters. An autopsy report concluded that they had all died of hypothermia, except for Ludmilla, who had suffered a heart attack. They all had signs of bruised lungs, and protein deficiency due to malnutrition was listed as a contributing factor to their deaths. The deaths were ultimately ruled to be accidental, But compared to the testimony of Valya, this ruling is strange, and is central to many of the theories in this case. The mysterious nature of this incident has rightfully caused many opinions to be put forward by those who have researched it. As with any strange event, these theories range from aliens and the supernatural to actual scientifically valid explanations. These theories all have strengths and weaknesses, and no one in particular fully explains the incident, but some have the potential to get close or even overlap with each other. The first theory is that the hikers saw something that they shouldn't have. This theory proposes that perhaps the hikers walked in on some sort of Russian military experiment in the mountains and were killed for what they saw. Their deaths were subsequently covered up by the police and medical examiner. It is true that the group had deviated from the usual route through the region, so it's possible that this change of plans led them to a group of experimenters that weren't prepared for visitors. But despite this, there are two main problems with this theory: the locations the hikers died in, and Valentina's survival. The Khamar Daban Mountains are a very public area with multiple groups of tourists traveling through at any given time in the summer. Siberia has many opportunities for secrecy, so it would be strange for a top-secret experiment to be taking place in a public location during tourist season. In addition to this, the particular part of the mountain that the hikers died on was an open area visible from the air and from higher ground. It wouldn't make sense for a top-secret mission worth killing people over to be in this section of the Khamar Daban Mountains, let alone the Khamar Daban Mountains themselves. Then there's Valya. Why did she survive? It doesn't seem possible for her to have escaped. Take a look again at the geography of the location. There's nowhere to hide or run to. If we were to put this aside and assume that somehow she did survive, then why wasn't she silenced or killed by the military afterward? If she was forced to lie about what happened, she definitely didn't help calm suspicions about the incident, and if she hadn't been forced to keep the secret, then why was her story so wild? This is the main problem with the military experiment theory. The second theory is that a nerve agent killed the hikers. Many people have pointed out that the symptoms described by Valya are consistent with death by chemical weaponry, specifically nerve agents. The frothing at the mouth and convulsing in particular match death by a strong nerve agent. This death also matches with the autopsy results. Since contact with nerve agents can cause respiratory distress, the bruising of the lungs can be a sign of death by nerve gas. Cardiac arrest is also caused by nerve agents, which matches Ludmia's cause of death. The cause of death of the other hikers could very well be hypothermia, even if they were exposed to a nerve toxin, since they could have been knocked unconscious or fallen into a coma, and then ultimately succumbed to exposure. Yet another thread of this theory was put forward by YouTuber Cadaver. He proposes that the specific nerve agent that killed the hikers may have been a Novichok gas. Novichok gases are a class of nerve agents created by Soviet Russia up till 1993, which is the year of this incident. They are thought to be the deadliest nerve agents to exist, being 10 times more deadly than VX and 20 times more deadly than sarin, and Novichok agents were reportedly tested in areas near the Khamar Daban region. Exposure to this gas causes rapid death, similar to what the hikers reportedly experienced. But both of the above theories have issues. The first and very common one with all of these is Valentina's survival. She was near most of her friends when they died, and even went back to the location without suffering a similar fate. The second is that no one was there to release the gas. So where did it come from? Nerve agents are soluble in water. They can take 4 months to evaporate. They are made of heavy particles that often float close to the ground, and the stronger ones can be hazardous in a location where they were used long after they were first released. This following theory is presented by the author of the Medium.com article. The rainstorm plays a very key part in this. The rain could have washed a strong nerve agent, likely a Novichok or VX, that had been tested at most 4 or 5 months prior in a more discreet site up the mountains and then down to the hill. As the morning sun evaporated the water from the rainstorm, some of the still hazardous agent went with it, but it did not travel far, staying in epicenters close to the ground. Sasha got unlucky and walked over a highly contaminated spot, causing almost instant symptoms. He may have absorbed the toxin through either his skin or by breathing it in. When Ludmila ran to him, she was exposed to the same toxic location. Tatiana, Victoria, and Timur were the first to reach Ludmila, but quickly ran away. This delayed their deaths slightly. Since Valya did not get close to Ludmila, Valya was not exposed to high levels of the toxin. Dennis was also not impacted by high levels initially, but his decision to hide and crouch down was his downfall. Small levels of toxin were floating close to the ground, and he breathed them in. He was exposed to less than the other 5, which is why his death was more delayed, but it ultimately caught up to him. Russian police, suspecting that runoff from the test could be the cause of the deaths, waited to start their search in order to ensure that the agent had most likely evaporated before sending a recovery team. I don't know how possible this theory would be, and it definitely requires a lot of trust in the solubility and evaporation times of nerve agents to believe. Despite Valya maybe being set apart by not getting too near the epicenter of contamination, it's still unlikely that she could have gone without being exposed. But I thought that I couldn't pass up putting this theory together, no matter how unlikely. Many people have also theorized that Valentina's story was inaccurate. When someone undergoes a traumatic experience, they often misremember aspects of the experience, especially when telling it years after, like Valya did. Certain parts of the story could have been exaggerated by Valya, by no fault of her own. The research surrounding the inaccurate nature of eyewitness statements is extensive. It's possible that the hikers died exactly how the autopsy report concluded they did. The group succumbed to hypothermia after not being properly sheltered that night, and died together on the mountain. Valya could have survived by her decision to go to the forest, a difference in clothing, or, as Valya reportedly says herself in regards to her survival, her physical fitness. It should also be added that people who die from hypothermia often experience paradoxical undressing, where they strip off their clothes shortly before death. This would be a valid explanation for the hikers being found partially undressed. This theory can not only stand on its own, but it can also be applied to other theories where there seems to be a missing piece in her testimony that doesn't match, and could have been exaggerated, but it's impossible to tell how credible each piece of her story is. Another theory is that the hikers drank contaminated water. This theory also relies on the rainstorm bringing toxins down, but instead it proposes that the hikers drank the toxins in their water. Lake Baikal, which sits above the mountains, is a well-known toxic waste dumping ground. If this waste was washed downstream and into the water, the hikers could have accidentally drank deadly toxins with their breakfast. The contaminant could have even been one of those water-soluble nerve agents mentioned. Valentina may have survived by drinking less, or getting her water from a different location than the rest of the hikers. Most highly toxic substances do take a few minutes to take effect, hence the hikers all dying later. Similar to the nerve agent theory, this toxin could have incapacitated the hikers, causing them to die from hypothermia before they succumbed to the toxin. Depending on the toxin, it may not be visible in a standard toxicology report. However, the problem with this theory is that the deaths were an isolated occurrence. If a water source used by many tourists was so badly contaminated, it doesn't make sense that only one group would be affected by it. In some instances, people have also theorized that mushrooms were to blame. This is one of the most interesting theories where Valya is actually affected by what killed the hikers, eliminating some of the questions around her seemingly being a total outlier compared to the other 6. Ludmila was a known forager who taught the art to her students. It's possible that one of the hikers found some mushrooms to add to their breakfast which wasn't the correct variety. After eating their breakfast, the effects of the mushroom poisoning began to take hold as they were walking, causing them to hallucinate and be sick. Interestingly, a common hallucination caused by psilocybin is to see other people cry blood. Overdoses of psilocybin can cause psychosis, convulsions, cardiac arrest, and even send someone into a coma. Once again, it's likely that the hikers died as a result of hypothermia due to being in an altered state, whether that was just tripping out or being in a coma. Valentina could have survived by eating less mushrooms, having a tolerance, or even just a genetic disposition to being less affected, wearing warmer clothes, or by running to the forest and sheltering out of paranoia. This incident may forever remain a mystery, but there are many interesting theories to consider that surround it. Tragically, it's likely that many of the families of the hikers will never receive closure in this case, since there is no clear-cut explanation. We can only hope that one day with better technology, answers can be recovered in this case. And until then, we only have questions. After reading these articles and doing some digging of my own, I'm actually surprised at how little documentation there is regarding this tragedy, especially since it took place in 1993. There are several retellings of the case on YouTube and on a handful of websites, but overall, the story remains basically the same. Perhaps someone listening has additional information regarding the Khamar Daban incident, and if so, I'd like to hear from you. In the coming months, I'll be sure to keep an eye open for more information as well. And in the meantime, I hope that the souls of those 6 hikers are at peace. As we come to the end of tonight's edition of From the Forest, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in and supporting the show. And if you've had a paranormal experience that occurred in or near the woods, you can contact me through email, voice message, or on our website. And all of these links can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday with our next episode. From all of us at Paranormal Mysteries, thank you for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.